Welcome everybody to this video on do-while loops in Java. So just to start things off, just notice of course that I've imported the scanner here from java.util, and I've created a scanner called s here. This is because I intend to use system input at some point during my code. Okay, so before we get into looking at do-while loops, I'm just going to do a quick review on while loops. So if we remember, before we start our while loops, we always need to initialize a value which we're going to use in our condition. In this case, I'm going to say int I is equal to 1. Then I'm going to create my while loop, which is while I is less than 5. Remember, I'm going to check this condition before I run anything inside of my while loop. Then I'm going to do something in my body code. In this case, I'm going to write system.out.println, and I'm going to say which iteration of my loop it is. So I'm just going to the iteration followed by the value of I. Then I'm going to increment the value of I so that eventually my condition will be false. After that, of course, my loop will finish and it will loop back and check the condition again. So this means the first time through it'll be 1, then 2, then 3, then 4, and then when it becomes 5, I will skip my loop and go on with the rest of my code. Now, while loops are very good when we want to repeat things over and over again. However, if we want to make sure that it runs at least once, while loops are not always good because sometimes they will be false on the very first time we want to go through it. So for instance, if i's value was 6, this value would be false and I would never run what was inside of here, similar to an if statement. Enter the do-while loop. The do-while loop will always run once, unlike the while loop. This is because, unlike the while loop, it checks its condition at the end instead of at the beginning. So, if I want to write one, I'm going to start with, of course, the same thing I did before. I'm going to create a variable called num. I'm going to have a value of 0. And then I'm going to create my do structure. So, unlike the while loop, where I wrote while and then a condition, there is no condition here. I just write do and then open my curly brackets. Okay, because I'm going to not check the condition yet, I'm going to run the body of the loop first. So let's go through. I'm going to output the word hello, and then I'm going to increase some value by 1 because I want it to eventually be false, since I'm planning on putting a condition that relies on the number being less than something. And then finally I'm going to use num is greater than 5. The reason I'm going to say greater is because I actually don't want this to run multiple times. Instead, I'm going to show the fact that a do while loop, unlike our while loop, will run once even if this condition is false right off the get-go. So since num's value is 0, and that is not greater than 5, this will be false. Now if I run this, I have my iterations for my first one up here. And then you'll notice that hello has been printed out once. And that's because hellos are, despite this being false, my do while loop will run the code inside the body first, then check the condition at the end, and only if that is true will it loop back. Okay, let's say we change it to something such as 7, and we want to use minus now, so eventually this will be false. If I run this, I will get hello twice, since it will run once when 7 is greater than 5, and we'll loop back. But before it loops back, I've already reduced the value to 6, so the first check is 6 is greater than 5. It loops back, runs the code again, this becomes 5, so 5 is not greater than 5, so it's false, so it's going to continue with my code, and will only run twice. So do-while loops can also be used, and are quite often used, to check user input. The reason for this is because you want to make sure, or what you can do is you can kind of send them the same message over and over again, but you don't have to create an initial message outside your loop first. So for instance, I'm going to create an integer called num1. I'm going to have a do-while loop. So I'm going to start with the do structure. Then I'm going to run system.out.print and ask them to input a number. I will run nextInt to get said number. And then my condition will be, as long as the number they enter is not 5, I want to continue. So in other words, I want them to correctly guess that it is 5. If they guess anything besides 5, I'm going to ask them again. So let's run this. It'll ask me to input a number. Remember, this is still the first time through. I have not got to my condition yet. I am just at num1 equals s, or s.nextInt. So if I enter the number 4, or is I equal to 5, so this is true, and it's going to loop back. Try another number, 99. Still true. And then I get a 5, and it's no longer true, so it continues on with the rest of my code. This is very useful when checking user inputs, since we know that it will always run once. The only downside about this, of course, is that I am not telling them what is wrong with their number. You can put this in by having an if statement inside the do while loop as well, which will also be effective. Now let's look at what this would have been if I had tried to do this in the while loop instead. So first I'd prompt them to input a number, and then I would get that number. Then I have my while loop, which checks the condition. Then I have to repeat this line again, saying input a number. I'd have to repeat this line again, saying to get that number. And then finally, I would get to the end when they are correct. So this structure here and this structure here are exactly the same. The difference is my do while loop requires a lot less code than the previous one, especially if the lines of code I'm going to write are more than just 2 lines. Maybe they're 5, maybe they're 10 lines of code. So please remember to try using do while loops when you want user input, and more specifically when you want a loop to run at least once.